Hey, Walter Sorrells back with more tips for the knife maker. Today, reviewing this, a 3-burner propane forge from Vevor. So, I've reviewed several budget forges from the online seller Vevor over the past few years, and each one has some subtle differences from the other. Is this one the best of the bunch, or a total dog? Let's find out. So here's the forge. It's a 3-burner model with a little door right here. Of course, I'm a knife maker, so I'll review it from that perspective, but I'll also touch on how it stacks up for blacksmiths and farriers. It ships in one box and assembly is very easy. The forge body is stainless steel with about an inch of wool type insulation, along with a couple fire bricks that can be used as a forge floor. You got 3 Venturi burners, 3 ball valves and injectors, some plastic hose, and a regulator. This is a plug-and-play item. You literally need nothing more than a good old backyard barbecue type propane tank to get started. The current cost on Vevor's website is $219 cash American, though they always seem to have, little incentives and sales going on. Full disclosure, as is the case with most of my reviews, I don't take any payment, but the review model is sent to me for free. So there's a link in the description that'll save you a little money, and maybe it puts some money in my pocket, but I'm not really sure, to be honest with you. Anyway, make of all that what you will. Assembly is very simple and intuitive, probably took me about 20 minutes. One additional mod I did do, however, was to coat the interior of the forge with a refractory cement called Satanite. I'd strongly advise coating the inside of this sort of forge as it keeps down dust and also protects the interior of the forge from mechanical damage. How does it work? Choke it down. These are the chokes right here. Crank up the gas. Light it. Boom. Fire. Now, something about all Venturi burners, and these in particular, you have to fiddle with the chokes a little until they get dialed in. And frequently you have to adjust them as you go, depending on how much gas you're running. More on that in a minute. Crank up all 3 burners and wait for the forge to come up to temp. Vevor says the forge's max temperature, quote unquote, is 2600 Fahrenheit. Now, that may be the max temp before it melts or something, but this sucker ain't getting at 2600 degrees. That said, who cares? As we'll see, it reaches welding temps, which is all you need. Most forges bill themselves as going to 2400, and I think that's a reasonable expectation here. Hey guys, let me jump in here to mention that I'm only able to do these reviews because of your support on Patreon. If you like what I'm doing here, if you see value in the years and years of gear reviews and tutorials that I've done here on YouTube, I'd earnestly ask you to pitch in and help out. In return, you'll have access to years and years of plans for knife builds and cool tools that I've made during all the time that I've been on YouTube. Sincere thanks to all the guys who are helping out the channel. All right, back to it. I ran the forge through its paces, doing a variety of bladesmithing tasks, including knife and tool forging, as well as the most demanding task that you'll ask your forge to perform, forge welding Damascus. It worked fine for everything I asked it to do. One of the previous Vevor forges I tested had an inadequate regulator which froze up very quickly. This one worked fine. But let me use that as a jumping off point for a couple comments. If you're on a tight budget, this forge will work for you. And it'll work unmodified, so you don't have to spend one more nickel, which is a big deal. However, I would strongly recommend a couple modifications if you plan to use this much. First, as I mentioned before, coating the interior. Second, replace the hose. In fact, I would prefer to replace them with some kind of manifold made from iron pipe. If you turn off any of those burners, they basically turn into chimneys, which means they heat up quite a bit, and that heats the hose. And I never took it this far, but I think ultimately you'd burn up the hose, and pretty quickly, and that is not good. Finally, I would always recommend getting a high quality regulator. Bear in mind, a nice 2-gauge Victor like this, made specifically for propane, will set you back several $100. Now, you don't necessarily need one quite this fancy, but in the long run, you'll be glad if you upgrade to something better than this glorified barbecue regulator. Like I said, it worked, but to me, not ideal. Basic rule of forges is the more burners, the more gas they consume. Pretty obvious. Now, I managed to forge weld one sizable billet of Damascus and forge one knife on a single 5-gallon tank of gas. That was basically running it with the regulator cranked all the way open. Now, if all you do is forge and heat treat, you can run it a little gentler, a little lower heat, and save some propane. But overall, this is not a super efficient forge. Personally, I always use 2 inches of insulation rather than the inch or so used here. But again, we're in budget world here, so I'm not overly concerned about that. Just something to think about. All right, let's wrap it up. First, like I said, this is genuinely a plug-and-play item, which is not true for all forges in this price range. I was able to forge knives, tools, and make Damascus using this forge without any mods or additional purchases, and that is a big deal. Of the 3 Vevor forges that I've tested, overall this was my favorite. Bear in mind, it will eat a fair amount of gas. So if shelling out dough for gas is going to crimp your ability to make stuff, just consider, maybe getting a 2 or even 1 burner forge. If you plan to use it for a long time, you'll either want to modify it or consider getting a more expensive and robust model. And as I said, I would recommend right from the jump getting a new regulator. That said, overall, this is exactly what you think it is. It's a starter or beginner type model. If you're a full-time farrier or a pro knife maker, obviously this is not going to be a go-to piece of kit for you, but that's not really who it's intended for. If you're a full-time farrier, if you're a pro knife maker, pro blacksmith, obviously this is not going to be the gear for you, but that's not who this is intended for. While I'm on the subject of blacksmiths and farriers, this is a pretty generic piece of equipment. It'll work fine for farriers, it'll work fine for blacksmiths, given that it is a propane forge and you can't really put very large pieces of material in it. All right, so final words. Look, most of us are not drowning in money, and so when we start a new hobby or a new pursuit, whatever it might be, getting the most bang for your buck can be the difference between getting started doing something or not doing it at all. So for the money, this is a good solid forge. It does what it's supposed to do. Good value for the money. All right, guys, thanks for watching and see you soon. Thanks for watching, guys. If you like what we're doing here, please subscribe and make sure that you click on that bell so you get notified of all the latest videos. Want to buy a knife from me? Check out my modern blades at tacticsarmory.com. Digging the channel? You can support our video making efforts on Patreon. I've been banging away on these videos for like 10 years, so I hope you'll show some love for all that hard work. Link in the cards and descriptions. Finally, if you're interested in making Japanese swords, check out my full line of Japanese sword videos where I show how to forge Japanese swords as well as how to polish them and how to make fittings, handles, and scabbards. WalterSorrellsBlades.com.